Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to this webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Nooran Baloch. I am from Bolan University of Medical and Health Sciences, Quetta, and I am the local officer for public health for my BMC Council. Today, the topic we're gonna talk about is the COVID-19 crisis and your mental health. That's the topic assigned to me in this session, and let's start it. Okay, so moving ahead, as you already know that we're here to address a crucial aspect of the COVID-19 outbreak, which is your mental well-being, a very important part of the public health response towards any outbreak or any disaster. During any emergency situation, the mental health can decline in the general population. Experiencing fear, anxiety, anger, panic attacks, and depression for any one of us during these times can be normal. So, the key points that I would be discussing today will be general sense of distress and anxiety amongst our communities, psychological effects of the pandemic on various demographic groups of the population, episodic exacerbation of pre-existing anxiety, mental disorders. Then we'll talk about domestic violence and at the end, few coping up mechanisms. Okay, can you change the slide, please? All right, so talking about disasters, fear, and the correlated fear. Uh, People who are vulnerable to these conditions, such as fear, anxiety, anger, panic attacks, might be the people who have pre existing mental health conditions, or they can be anyone from amongst us who might never had faced depression or anxiety before. But now they can feel vulnerable because of huge changes in our lifestyles, the fear of contracting the disease and the virus, or the uncertainty which the COVID-19 pandemic has brought with it. Fear and anxiety about a disease can be overwhelming. So, anxiety or fear is a response to any perceived or actual threat or danger, and fear is always closely linked with anxiety and panic in response to when things are unknown or uncertain to us. COVID-19 is a new virus. We don't know much about it yet, although we're getting there. But still, to feel the fear, I think it's natural for any one of us. Change the slide, please. Okay, so let's talk a bit about fear. Fear is a natural process and it can be elicited or even can be aggravated by anything, but mainly it can be a result of misinformation and rumors. And one way to tackle this can be learning the facts instead of your forwarded information on your WhatsApp messages. To face the fear, you might be facing all of the things that are mentioned in the slide, that such as changes in your sleep or eating patterns, difficulty sleeping, worsening of chronic health problems, or worsening of any pre-existing mental health condition. Change the slide, please. Okay, you might not know that you're experiencing fear. Part of the natural response when you feel fear is to ask many questions. You might be asking yourself a lot of questions or might be preoccupied with thoughts about your health, about how to protect yourself and your loved ones, about your future, um, your work, and these thoughts can all represent as anxiety. So, when you're questioning everything, I would strongly suggest that you should get information from credible sources, such as from WHO's website or any national or international health services provider's website. Also, I want to highlight one more important factor here, which is being overexposed to information. An amount of flow of information all the time that we are getting these days. It can be a huge factor in exacerbating our fear and anxiety. Constantly watching news or sticking to social media and internet towards the same topic can be overwhelming. I would recommend everyone who can relate to this to assess yourself for a day or two when you're exposed to the normal routine of sticking to news and information. And then at the end of the day, ask yourself how much of this actually has benefited you and how much of this has overwhelmed you. This would help everyone here to cut out those unnecessary headlines or forwarded messages and actually can make you feel mentally and psychologically relieved. Okay, so talking about living in house and being stuck all the time, and almost uh, all of us are living with our families or who already were are spending more time in home these days. And you might have noticed changes in behavior of people around you because how you would respond to any stressful situation depend on your background, your needs, your lifestyle, environment, especially your age and various other factors. You might not be reacting to the COVID 19 as your other family members or friends. Your intensity and pattern of stress and anxiety can be different on many levels, as it is showing on your slide. So, explaining it a bit further, I would like to add that, uh, for for instance, that if you have elderlies in your families, their fear regarding their health might be overwhelming because of the studies we have seen previously establishing the fact that older people are more vulnerable or prone to COVID disease. Dealing with them can be a bit hectic at these times, but sharing simple facts about what's going on giving clear information, and also a very important factor on which I would strongly emphasize today would be minimizing their exposure to unnecessary news and information would help them from getting agitated. If they have any underlying health condition, try to keep them well nourished and give their medications on proper timing, and staying in touch with their physicians or primary care providers over the phone can help keeping them relaxed. Dealing on the with can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so talking about children now, dealing with children and teens, on other hand, can be stressful as well, as they perceive and observe everything happening around them in a different way, and they react accordingly to how to see the adults around them acting. They express their emotions in unusual ways. They can be very clingy, angry, agitated, or it can get to the extent of them having nightmares and bedwetting. Try to give them a sense of normalcy. I would say that try to maintain their familiar routine or set a new routine for them, which would include establishing established times for learning, playing, and doing other activities, or socializing over the phone or video calls with their friends or the person they felt joy in spending time with, who can no longer surely visit and come over due to self isolation. And then limiting their screen times is one another important thing, and again limiting families exposure towards news coverage and information can help them definitely thrive in these stressful situations. Next slide please. The next one. Okay, so moving ahead, let's talk about those with pre-existing mental conditions. Living with mental illness, years of your life can be tough, uncertain, scary, and more. But this pandemic surely can be exacerbating all of these things. For people with pre-existing anxiety disorder or depression, any form of stress and disaster can be overwhelmingly disturbing and can exacerbate their conditions. If you have friends and family who are diagnosed with any form of mental condition, you should be looking after and they should be checked upon constantly, and you should be discussing about how they're feeling and their emotions, as I'm sure they won't feel like sharing anything they're experiencing. And if anyone have a known condition, they should keep in contact with their psychiatrists, counselors, or therapists and immediately let them know if you're finding your symptoms worsening or any new symptoms or negative thoughts. Okay, next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so talking about another very important aspect of this pandemic, social distancing, isolation, and stuff. Social distance, closed doors, escalating vulnerability towards domestic violence. Domestic violence is something that we have seen escalating during this pandemic worldwide. We're all advised to stay home to be protected from getting the disease. But let's talk about what if for some of us, our homes are much more dangerous to our physical and mental well being? And what if for some of us, our homes are not, we're not safe at home? Domestic violence is a serious issue in our communities, and women and children are usually the victims. The lockdown has surely increased the surge in violence and increased daily number of cases are being reported worldwide. Talking about countries like Pakistan, China, Italy, Germany, Brazil, Australia, and France are reported for increase in violence during the period of lockdown since March 2020. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this slide would show you that Government of Pakistan Ministry of Human Rights has created a special helpline for such people. If you happen to know anyone around facing violence or abuse in any form, or you might yourself can be a victim, please, I would say report these such cases to the attached helpline number, which is showing on your screens. You can contact them on WhatsApp or their toll free numbers. We need to remember that not only coronavirus, but there are a lot of other factors which can physically and mentally harm us, even to the extent that we can lose precious lives. So, yeah, we cannot ignore all other important factors as well happening around us. Okay, so next slide. Finally, we have tried to address the issues you can be facing during these tough times, which could directly or indirectly, of course, affect your mental wellness. Now, let's talk about a few coping mechanisms which can be helpful to stay mentally and psychologically healthy, which in turns, I think definitely help us to keep physically active and nourished and get going. So, number one would be obviously limiting exposure to information inflow, watching news, getting stick to your phones all the time, and learning about uh, the pandemic or the disease from various sources. Limiting exposure to information inflow and news is something that you guys have seen me advocating from beginning of this session, and I cannot emphasize enough on this point. So, number two would be to accept the uncertainty, a very important point, because accepting what's happening around us in a healthy way can give us peace of mind. And that way, we can focus and shift our thoughts toward a positive and productive direction. Okay, so talking about another fact, according to Dartmouth School's director of anxiety disorder, which I was listening to him a few days ago on YouTube. I actually find out this method pretty amazing if we practice it. Uh, so he goes like, set a worry period for yourself. Give yourself a good amount of 30 minutes. Sit down, take a pen and a paper, and write down whatever is bothering you. And think about all of the uncertainty and your fears in those 30 minutes, and then let it go. Like, let all of your tension, your fear, and your negative thoughts, let them go. When those 30 minutes are over, by practicing this on daily basis, you'll notice that the rest of your day would go pretty easy, because surely your brain would be trained uh, with if you practice this every day. Your brain is definitely going to get trained, and it would know that there is a fixed period of time for worrying and all the negative thoughts to think about. So for the rest of the day, I think our days can go pretty easy. Finally, I would say taking care of your body, physically being active and doing mindfulness exercises, meditations, and a healthy diet getting fresh air, focusing on your work or your school, and staying in touch with friends, colleagues, are some of the ways that you can get yourself going in these tough times. That's all about from my side, everyone. Hopefully, it was of some benefit. Thank you all for joining and giving us your precious time. Stay safe, everyone. And if you guys have any questions, please leave them in the chat box.
Thank you so much, Nuran, for letting us all know about how public health is being affected by COVID-19 and how it's affecting the mental health of the general public. Now, I would like to hand over the session to Mahnur Arif, who is the local officer of medical education from Faisalabad Medical University. Mahnur, you can please start.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I hope everyone listening is safe and healthy. I am Mahnur Arif, local officer of medical education for Faisalabad Medical University local cabinet. I will be addressing an important issue, that's COVID-19 and mental health of medical students. As we all know, our world is experiencing an extraordinary health emergency, that is the neuropsychiatric linkage between outbreak of acute respiratory infections and mental disorders, which date back to prevalence of influenza and severe acute respiratory syndrome that took place years ago. Along with general public, medical students who have been quarantined for so long are worried much about loss of studies and clinical rotations, of course. Can we have next slide, please? Next. But here's to something we could do to reduce mental stress and anxiety associated with pandemic and crisis. First of all, it's connectivity. Reach out to trustworthy people, friends, or some health professionals and express your feelings. You know what? It's totally okay to talk about your insecurities and disappointments at times. Then there is another thing, that's maintain a healthy routine. Balance flexibility with maintaining routines. Keep things in perspective. During times of stress, pay attention to your own needs and feelings. You could work from home, the online classes and assessments. There's a thing, then there comes a thing, there's a relaxation techniques. These techniques can help reduce stress. We all know, no matter what's the cause, stress floods your body with hormones. Your heart pounds, breathing speeds up, and muscles tense. This stress response is a normal reaction to threatening situations actually, but we could develop healthier ways of responding to stress. You could practice breath focus, body scan, guided imagery, mindfulness meditation, yoga, repetitive prayer. Another thing, don't refer to people with disease as COVID-19 cases, victims, COVID-19 families, or the disease. These are people who have COVID-19, people who are being treated for COVID-19, or people who are recovering from COVID-19. And after recovering from COVID-19, their life will go on with their jobs, families, and loved ones. Minimize watching, reading, or listening to news about COVID-19. Can we have next slide? Minimize watching, reading, or listening to news about COVID-19 that causes you to feel anxious or distressed. Seek information only from trusted sources and mainly so that you could take practical steps to prepare your plans and protect yourself and loved ones. Seek information updates at specific times during the day, once or twice. The sudden and near constant stream of news report about an outbreak could cause anyone to feel worried. Get the facts, not rumors and misinformation. Gather information at regular intervals from WHO websites and the local health authority platforms. Remember, stay informed without getting overwhelmed. You could participate online campaigns to make sure people getting right information and not bombarded with rumors 24 hours. You could join telemedicine and online COVID courses. Work on yourself, be productive. Don't think about classes, loss, and all in again. Being medical student to be more productive, find ways to help your community. Because sometimes when you are sitting idly doing nothing, your mental health takes a toll. Last but not the least, there's a thing, psychological first aid, PFA. It could be the strategy to support each other in the times of crisis that include social support, healthy habits, and relaxation. Use PFA app, humor, support your frontline warriors, appreciate and encourage. Can we have next slide? Take home message: protect yourself and be supportive to others. Assisting others in the time of need could benefit both the person receiving support and the helper. Working together as one community can help to create solidarity in addressing COVID-19 together. Acknowledge the role of health professionals play in saving lives and keeping your loved ones safe. Stay safe, stay home, stay informed. Thank you, audience, and that brings us to end. Can we have next slide, please? For latest information for WHO on COVID-19, there are references displayed on the screen. Next slide, please. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat box so we could answer them at the end of webinar in question answer sessions. Thank you very much.